Hey, this is Ben. I just wanted to let you know we recorded this well in advance before the re-election of Donald Trump, which is fucking miserable news, as I'm sure you're all feeling like dog shit, as I am. And yeah, I don't. What am I gonna tell you? Right? I don't have any words of comfort. One thing I could say though is that this is actually kind of a good movie to watch if you're feeling hopeless. In many ways, it is a hopeless movie about the silence of God, but there's a lot of thematic relevance you could take from this film. I think a lot of people, religious or otherwise, are in many ways feeling God's silence with this election, and I don't know. I really like this movie, and I think even though it might not necessarily bring you comfort, if you're looking for something to engage with, something to take your mind off everything, yeah, obviously it's heady. It's not going to be everyone's go-to movie, but you should think about watching it. It's powerful, and it has a lot to say. Anyway, stay safe. I hope everyone's doing okay.
Winter Light. Ingmar Bergman, the most celebrated and distinguished filmmaker of our time, presents his first film since winning 2 Academy Awards. Bergman reaches new heights in dramatic achievement as he explores the life of a country pastor, his relationship with his mistress, and the people around him. Starring Gunnar Bjornstrand as the pastor, struggling to find God and love in a winter world.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm James Lipton, and we're here, what was the name of the show again? On the Director's Chair. The director's spin-off of Inside the Actor's Studio. And once again, we are incredibly lucky, fortunate, and blessed to be joined by none other than Ingmar Bergman. Ingmar?
Hello.
We're so happy to have you back. How has your stay been?
I have enjoyed staying in Hollywood. I have been slowly aging backwards, like Benjamin Button.
Fascinating.
I made a picture of Dorian Gray, and I made a Benjamin Button of myself. And so now I am at hot young Ingmar age, ready for poontang. I am ready to suck virgin blood. Sorry, that was my impression of the vampire.
Stirring, fascinating stuff. Of course, last week we were talking about the film Through a Glass Darkly, a film that touches on mental health and its effects on one's own beliefs. Today we're going to be looking at another one of your films in the Silence of God trilogy, Winter Silence, a movie where Gunnar Bjornsson, your close friend and collaborator, plays a priest coming to terms with his own faith. How did the making and the process of Through a Glass Darkly kind of inform what you wanted to do in this film, Ingmar?
Well, Gunnar was somebody I met by mistake. I was looking for which actor in Sweden had the funniest name, and I came upon Gunnar Bjornstrand, and I could not get out of my head. I could not get out of my head the phrase, "She Gunnar on my Bjornstrand." Previously, I had invented a new joke called "She Volker on my Schlandorf."
Yes, of course. Yes.
And it was one of my biggest hits in Sweden.
That's true.
It came out in between Seventh Seal and Wild Strawberries. And
your joke did?
Yes, and the joke was sold more tickets than both films combined to a performance of me saying the joke. So I thought I should include Gunnar Bjornstrand in my next several movies because his name was funny.
It is one of the funniest names in an oeuvre that is filled with comically Swedish names.
I thought it would be interesting to make him sad priest who is bad at his job. He can be a priest who is doing fail compilation. Fail, I had recently enlisted into the fail army. I had been drafted into the fail army, and I thought I would make new video. All of my people call my movies films, but I call them videos because I am a content creator. And I am a maker, and I do not like to include unnecessary sex scenes in my movies because I am a maker who makes content video. And I thought for my next video I would make a video called, in the original Swedish title of Winter Light is Epic Priest Fail Compilation, 80 minutes long. And of course in America they are scared of a long Swedish title.
Frankly, we're afraid of the truth.
They're afraid of the truth, and so they called it something that sounded like Arthus. They said it would be more successful in the Arthus if they called it Winterlight.
Well, it is a beautiful poetic name. What I'm hearing,
guess so. I think my title is better.
It doesn't speak much. It doesn't reflect the actual content of the picture. Is what I'm getting from you, Ingemar.
Well, I mean, it's generic, so, whatever.
Why don't we open it up to our students again for questions?
Yes.
Who do we have?
You there, smelly boy.
What's up, Ingmar? My name is Anthony Kiedis. I was wondering...
Are you from the Red Hot Chili Poopers?
No, he's my uncle.
Oh, gross.
We just have the same
That's
name.
too bad for you. I don't ever want to feel like a Swedish man. Take me to the Swede, you Swede, and we'll go to Swedish land.
How long will I sleep? Yeah, so I was on Reddit the other day, and I saw that actually Winter Light is the most favorited liked film on Our Atheism. And I just wanted to know what your thoughts on, how this movie has impacted, a new generation of anti-theists who kind of, preach the gospel of Christopher Hitchens and who are trying to dismantle the religious monarchy that reigns over our lives.
Well, I think it is kind of stupid because I don't think that the church has a lot of influence these days here now. So it feels all a little bit performative to me. So I am not happy that is how it has been received, that it has become an epic Reddit bacon movie for lonely atheists. I think that is kind of sad. I think that's kind of sad. However, I will also admit that I am the one who create many bot accounts and I give it an update. So I have been updating the posts to make it more popular. So it is my fault that it is #1 movie on Our Atheism.
Fascinating. Ingmar, it sounds like you're a bit of a Reddit head. I was wondering what some of your other favorite subreddits were.
Oh, I use it mostly for piano. So I have mostly a piano account.
Porn.
Yeah.
Swedish porn should be called pure.
It is called Pjorn. PJORN. So I like, Gone Wild, and then all of the different variations. Gone Wild, thick and with fat ass and with small ass. I like, there is one called Hold the Moan, which is about people having sexual intercourse in situations where they cannot make noise, so they are trying to be quiet, and I find that very it hornifies me, because to me we are all in similar position where we are trying to have intercourse with God, and God is silent.
As James Lipton, I'm incredibly familiar with our Hold the Moan. Great stuff on there. Perhaps we could turn it to another student.
You there, very tall, short man. Tell me.
Oh, hey, Ingmar. My name is.
I don't care what your name is. Ask a good question.
My name is Tintin Proportions.
I take it back. I take everything I say back. I'm happy to know that is your name.
And I was just wondering what your current relationship with any religion, whether it be Christianity or any kind of religion, is now that you are a dead filmmaker.
Oh, great question. Finally, somebody make good question. Thank you, Tintin Proportions. I appreciate. What a thoughtful question that is. I am dead, yes, is true, and I am in the afterlife right now, and I can tell you, although I had many periods in my life where I would not believe in God, and I would be our atheism, number one up, dude. Now that I am dead, I can tell you there is, in fact, an afterlife, and it is very much the same as the regular world, where I am famous filmmaker Ingmar Bergman, and everyone loves me. And I go to show where people ask me questions on a podcast. In fact, the afterlife is one big podcast appearance. You go around to all the different people's podcasts, and you interview for a few minutes. Wait a minute. This is not heaven. Podcast appearances, I don't like these. I don't listen to podcasts. They make me sick. I don't like franchisees or Joe Rogan or other similar.
Talk to.
I don't listen to talk to with Harley Wedge. I don't listen to any of these. I am in hell. Oh no, I thought I was in heaven, but I am in hell. Oh, Ingmar. Oh no.
Yes.
Why? Oh God, why have thou forsaken me?
Unfortunately, the actor's studio is within the sixth circle of hell.
No!
And,
but I was a pretty good maybe not a good guy, but, maybe I was mean to my wives. My wives! But I made a lot of pretty good movies. Pizza pie. ¿Cómo está?
And I, of course, James Lipton, am also known as Asmodeus, lieutenant in Satan's infernal army.
I had a suspicion you have a big horns coming out of your hood.
Yes.
Well, this is fucking bullshit. I'm going to talk to her now, because if I'm going to be in hell, at least I might talk to a nice blonde lady.
Well, this has been the latest episode of On the Director's Chair, live from the sixth circle of hell. Hopefully, Ingmar, we'd love to have you back.
Well, I have no choice. I am condemned to hell, so I'll be back, I would say, in about a week.
This is our eternity.
It honestly could be worse.
Abandon all hope, all ye who listen to this podcast.
Don't tell me what to do.
Sorry.
I directed All These Women. No one knows that movie, but that's the one I'm most proud of. All These Women. It sounds like a fake movie, but it's a real movie I made. Babidi Booey, Bacchini, Ciao Bella. My name is Ingmar Bergman. Goodbye. Wow.
That's a solid gold bit.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to like that.
It's a great way to kill 13 minutes.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Now there's only 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
All right, Winterlight, what do you think? I thought it was good.
Yeah, it was good.
And we're gone. Goodbye, everybody.
Adios. See you next week for The Silence.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get experimental with that one and do like an hour and 15 minutes of silence.
That actually would be great,
like
eh?
that song. That composition that's just all rest stops.
John Cage?
Yes.
Yeah. 4:33.
That's it.
Do you want to actually do that? Do you think people would like that? That would be pretty funny, eh?
Yeah.
You think it's that funny?
I think it's too obvious.
Too obvious, eh? We'll think about it. We'll think about it. Yeah.
Weekly movie roundup. We recorded this immediately after recording a 1 hour 17-minute episode of just us
twice
talking
as
about
long
the
as I
movies
said it would be.
we had watched, so we've got nothing.
We got nothing, and that's good because this is going to be a short episode. These Bergman episodes are going to be short. These Bergman films are short.
Yeah, well, and there's not much to say about them. You know, they're quite like slight.
Is that the case? There's not much to say about them.
Yeah, kind of. Unfortunately,
I don't know. I think you're wrong. I think there probably is a lot to say about them. It might just be that maybe we're not the most suited to talk about these films. But I think we did an okay job with Through a Glass Darkly.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's get right into it. Let's get it out of the way. Let's rip this off like a Band-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
I admire this movie as like a little, 80-minute, like little dark, small scale kind of thoughtful piece.
Fail compilation. Yeah.
Fail compilation. But I did not like it as much as Through a Glass Darkly. I think a big part of that for me is something that James Lipton kind of hinted at.
James Limpton.
Or one of the students,
James
perhaps.
Limp Dick. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, he needs Blue Chew.
Yeah. Who doesn't?
In that this movie is all about, having like a reckoning with faith. And I think while like still presented dramatically in a really engaging, thoughtful way, I personally was more interested in kind of the conversations, explorations around like rapidly deteriorating like mental health that kind of took place in Through a Glass Darkly.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this one is kind of, and like, faith is tied to that in a way, because they're talking about like, oh man, like our sister is going crazy and we're like powerless. Is there no God? Mm-hmm. This one's more expressly, just a priest kind of being like, is there no God? And I don't find that tug of war, push and pull between, someone reconciling with their faith as interesting maybe as like a story about mental health and like a deteriorating psyche. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I guess I know what you mean. I think Through a Glass Darkly, which I really did like, I can understand why maybe on a psychological level that would be more appealing. Mm-hmm. But I think there's something like aesthetically about this movie that I think is kind of like a huge achievement, compared to even something like Through a Glass Darkly, which is beautifully made, right?
Yeah.
And is maybe a little bit more ostentatious. Well, I mean, every
more melodramatic.
It's more melodramatic, and by comparison, this movie is extremely like subdued and aesthetic and barren, right? That of course anything else would feel ostentatious compared to it, like something like, and even just the setting, right? Like this is set in a church for
the most part,
for most of the time, and then when you go outside of the church, it's a like icy like blizzard. Hellhole, Swedish winter hellhole.
Yeah.
I really liked this movie. I watched it under similar circumstances as Through a Glass Darkly, like kind of late in the evening, all the lights out, like locked in, right? And I actually I almost watched it again.
Wow.
I almost had found time to watch it again, but it really wasn't possible because I also wanted to watch the making of documentary, the somewhat exhaustive 5-part making of documentary that aired on Swedish television, and then it's included in the Criterion box set or on the disc if you have the Blu-ray, and which is called Ingmar Bergman Makes a Movie. Mm. Likely thing for him to make, I was saying.
Yeah, it's part of that little collection I have there, but I haven't actually watched it. I should.
It's interesting, and well, maybe I'll just talk about that a little bit first, just as a way to set it up. So it's the director. I don't know how to say his name. Geez, but Vilgot Sjöman. I don't know. I'm sorry.
You got to drag out that first syllable too. It is
Sjöman. If you just say it like Sjöman. I don't know. Anyway. he is noteworthy for, you know, a lot of Swedish films, but in North America, primarily I'm Curious Yellow and I'm Curious Blue. Basically, this is just interviews with Bergman and others involved in the film, from right after the script is complete through to camera tests, costuming, set construction, and scene rehearsals. Even Bergman didn't want to have him shoot any of the actual filming, like production, so you don't see that, but you do see a rehearsal. And then the further parts like include the editing process, and then an interview with Bergman about anticipating the reception of the movie. And then after the movies come out, you actually hear the critic reviews and then get Bergman's reaction to them. The thing, it's like 2.5 hours. It's long. And it can be a little dry, but it's also an invaluable document of the process. And like a lot of these great films from other filmmakers, like making of documentaries, it feels like almost like you shouldn't be seeing this. You know, you see behind the scenes and you're like,
he's walking around naked a lot.
Yeah, Gunnar Bjornstrand's letting. He's actually naked under his he's not wearing any underwear under his priest smock or whatever.
This is the way I feel most comfortable.
She Gunnar on my Bjornstrand. Seeing how precise the production is, it's not surprising, right? Because you would imagine Ingmar Bergman would be a perfectionist, right? You'd imagine the blocking, it would be like very important to him, right? And every camera move with and the lighting with Sven Nykvist would be extremely precise, and of course it is, right? But it's still refreshing to see that the movie is made in much the same way as any other movie, right? Even though when you're watching this film or a lot of other Bergman films, it feels like they're like divinely created, like or any other perfect film. Like sometimes this is not. They're obviously very different filmmakers, but it's almost like when you see the behind the scenes stuff from Stanley Kubrick, you're like how precise everything is and how calculated everything feels, and then you see some of the behind the scenes stuff, and it's like, oh, they're just coming up with this shot on the day. He's like, what if we filmed like Jack Nicholson in the freezer? There's that clip that goes around a lot. And he's like, what if we just filmed him from under here? You know? And you're like, well, boom, there's this kind of iconic composition of him, like freaking out, like, let me out of here, Wendy, you know, that whole thing, right?
At the end of the day, you know, there's a crew,
there's just people.
Camera. Yeah, there's people they're photographing essentially. Yeah,
exactly. And so it's really cool to actually just see the process. And there's a couple of things I learned from it as well. So it's just some other kind of introductory things
So you're going to apply to your own filmmaking?
Well, I don't think so. I don't think so. There's an intro as well that I watched with Bergman that was recorded, must have been sometime in the early 2000s or late 90s, early 2000s. So after the movie has kind of been canonized a little bit, right? And he's talking about how before this movie, he was finding himself like overly concerned with the audience, with like ingratiating himself to the audience. And he was concerned about the reception and about what critics thought, right? And how with Winter Light, he didn't want to have to think about that. He wanted to just maybe make a movie on his own terms without like being concerned if people would like it. And then it, you know, did go on to be one of his favorite films and one he was most fond of. And he actually does say in that, and I don't know, he says that for once he made a brave film. And and I think maybe that is just like
our atheism.
Yeah, well, exactly, right. It is in his mind, I think he made this for himself, maybe more than he did for like an audience, you know. And it is also funny like hearing him talk about like making something for the audience. And then lastly, just to talk about Sven Nykvist, which you know, the other kind of key collaborator, obviously in a lot of Bergman's films, but especially in this one, that they would go and visit this real church and photograph it for hours of a day and for like days at a time. And just the way that the light would move through the church, just like photographing it and taking notes so that they could replicate. And he said in this interview, they wanted it to be gray and shadowless, this November light, literally this like winter light, right? They actually, that church, all those interiors are a set. It feels like a real church, of course, but they rebuilt it as a set. And they even gave it a real roof, which typically for a set you wouldn't build, right? And I don't know if this is exactly why they would have done that necessarily, but Nykvist does sort of talk about how it prevented him, and I think this is on purpose, preventing him from lighting it traditionally, where you would have like the set where all all the lights are up top, like shooting down, right?
Yeah. Like more theatrical kind of studio space.
Yeah. And this is actually another. Okay, sorry. I know I'm rambling on, but they're just trying to get all this stuff out before we could talk about the actual movie. But about I think a lot of the times Bergman is accused of being theatrical, right? Or maybe that his films feel like too theatrical, and he did, throughout his career have very like separately delineated kind of like he directed a lot of plays and a lot of adaptations and operas and so on, and then he had his film work, right? And his films were all things that he wrote, not adaptations typically. Some of them were, but this, for example, is something he wrote personally from a personal place. And there's actually a good quote from the director Aaron Schimberg, whose movie A Different Man is out right now, that when he's interviewed for Criterion about, they do those like your 10 favorite movies, right? And I'm just going to read this here really quickly.
He selected Winter Light?
Yeah, that was one of them. Yeah. He says this is about the sort of theatrical issue. The first 15 minutes of Winter Light consist solely of a church service. Nothing else happens. All the dialogue in this scene is the pastor's sermon, or whatever you call it. But the whole movie is laid out. The location of the church, who all the characters are, the nature of their relationships, what torments them. Before the scene ends, and you realize you've just sat through a quarter of an hour of church, and you were actually paying attention. In fact, you were riveted. Not many filmmakers could pull that off, or would even think of trying. The experience of watching this same scene on stage would feel a lot like sitting in church. I think that's an interesting way of putting it, right?
Yeah.
This theatrical presentation, I think some people might call it, but the grammar of the film is so specifically filmic that like it doesn't feel theatrical to me.
No, this one, I'd say this one was like less theatrical than Through a Glass Darkly.
In a way,
right?
While
it's kind of like a smaller scale, more subtle film, it is very much like a film. There is like very thoughtful shot compositions and camera placements, whereas there's a play within the movie of Through a Glass Darkly, and there is that, and
the structure is like a play as well.
Yeah,
a chamber piece,
and like a lot of like heightened emotions. This one's like, it's just smaller scale, but it's most certainly more cinema. No,
definitely. So I mean, just to recap the plot a little bit for you. Gunnar Bjornstrand plays a priest in, I guess, what is a pretty small Swedish town.
In Sweden.
Somewhere in Sweden. And he is having a crisis of faith. He feels, the Swedish title is different. It's not Winter Light. Mm-hmm. It's the communicants, like those who receive the communion. But also like communication, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a big part of what the movie is about. Or lack thereof, I guess.
Oh, even bigger in the silence.
Yeah. But, I mean, Winter Light, kind of a good title, right? I mean, if you have to do a kind of a shitty, simplified English title, more commercial English title for something called The Communicants.
I like it a lot.
Yeah, I actually think it's The Communicants kind of sounds clunky. I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty beautiful. Like, I watched Winter Light. Ooh.
Yeah, Winter Light. I know.
I watched The Communicants. I've watched The Communicants.
Yeah. Yeah, we have been watching you, Communicants. We have been watching you, communicants.
Danger.
Yeah, and Winter Light, I mean, and that's so funny that it does sort of takes the focus off of the plot of the movie and more onto the aesthetics again.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I don't think is the intention necessarily, but that's what I think for me makes this movie kind of the masterpiece that it is, right? Okay, so he's the bad priest, similar to Bad Grandpa, similar to Bad Santa, he's
teacher,
bad teacher. He's the bad priest,
the bad lieutenant. Port
of call New Orleans, port of call what's a place in Sweden?
Stockholm.
Yeah,
port of call
Stockholm.
Bad priest, port of call Stockholm.
Yeah, that's what this movie's called. And it opens with this church service. You see, it's pretty sparsely attended, but there are people there. It's a morning service, and basically there's some other characters that you meet that the priest essentially fails to help.
Yeah, or is like kind of actively rude towards.
Yeah, or in particular in the case of his sort of ex-mistress, or the woman who loves him or whatever, he is genuinely extremely cruel to.
And there's also the like helper the person who goes to church, but he helps out like around the church and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and he's kind of got like a physical disability.
Yeah, the sexton is his position.
Sexton.
Yeah, he is. So he's the best character in the movie.
Yeah,
like and he is the best part of the end of the. He's the character who actually feels like. Well, okay, we'll get to that. So basically, there's these characters who are like the priest is struggling with the silence of God. There's a fisherman and his wife who come to talk with him. The fisherman is played by Max von Sydow, and he is also struggling with the silence of God, specifically in the face of the news that China is building an atomic bomb, and the atomic anxieties of the early 60s are different than they are today. Even though today it feels like we could get nuked, there could be a giant nuclear war in a couple years anyway. But it's a different anxiety. It's a different time, of course, and it's very present for this fisherman, and he is kind of obsessed with it. It's all he can think about. And his wife is pregnant, and they have other kids at home, and she is seeks help from the priest, right?
Yeah. Interesting that their names are person. Which
Yeah.
is kind of like, person.
Yeah.
As if they're like everyday. They're the everyday layman people.
They are, yeah. And they come and talk to him, and all he can really provide for them is trust God. Put your trust in God, right? And there's this is what makes this movie so great, is that Ingmar obviously framing and blocking God, the scene where he tells them, where he all he can really muster up is put your faith in God, put your trust in God. It has the wife in the foreground and Max von Sydow in the background, his head turned away.
Being silent.
Yeah, being silent. He turns and looks at the priest when he says this, like as if to be like, is that really it?
Yeah.
Is that it? And you see Bjornstrand's reaction, and he says it somewhat confidently, but then he looks down, and there's this doubt in his eyes that is so painful. And then the camera moves, like he stands up and the camera moves down, and you see his fingers kind of nervously tapping on the desk, like, could you please leave? It's like this. It's so upsetting to me. I have not been a religious person, or I ever sought out the advice of a priest or a religious figure, right? I don't have this direct experience, but I have experience both telling people, trying to help people with advice, and then of course seeking advice myself. And maybe this is the case, we were talking about earlier, maybe the explicit mental health or mental illness aspect makes these stories more relatable, like in the previous film, and less so in this one. But it's all the same. It's the same sort of thing. Like, it's all like, what is crisis of faith if not, a mental health problem, a mental health crisis as well, right?
But it's just like, filtered and told in a context that is just like less interesting.
Yeah,
to me.
And less relatable. No, totally.
Yeah.
But the doubt that he has when he's saying that, I felt that. I've been the Max von Sydow character looking at a therapist being like, really? Like, you're just saying, I'm about to blow my brains out next to a frickin' river if you don't tell me something. And it's like, put your faith in God, like put your faith in the medication, put your faith in whatever it is, right? And then on the Gunnar Bjornstrand side, when surely you've been in a situation where someone has come to you and they're absolutely desperate, and you're scared to even suggest something to them, and but you try anyway because that's the position you're in, and you try to help somebody out, but all you can say is this totally rote, meaningless, fluff. And but you just have to say it God, like, this is the worst. I find this when somebody's like parents die or something, and they tell you, and you're like, like, I'm so sorry. It's you say some totally meaningless like thing that you just feel like you have to say. Obviously it's different in this case. Like, it's his freaking job to comfort these people. I don't know. I just found that scene very powerful. But just to get rid of the plot, basically what happens is the other character is his sort of, I guess she's like a school marm, like who loves him and who he treats very poorly. We learn that his wife has died 4 years ago. He's obviously still very hung up on that, and that he changed significantly when that happened, that his whole message of the message that is at the end of Through a Glass Darkly, God is love, and he has sort of abandoned that message, and he has changed as a pastor, and he is so cruel to her throughout. She writes him this letter, and we see in this very long unbroken take her reading the letter to him, which is so powerful. And they talk about this awful rash she has in her hands that he was like repulsed by, and I have this awful psoriasis on my hands that I'm going through, and I was like, when it cut to the shot of her and the bandaged hands, I was like, oh my God, like why? Like it's just so funny, like it's so weird when you come to these movies, or these movies come to you rather. So many times in my life I could have sat down and watched Winter Life, but now I sit down and I watch it when I'm suffering from this awful psoriasis that like makes my life very painful.
You have bad psoriasis and incompetent therapists, and
yeah,
it's just hitting you so hard.
Well, it's just funny that this is what great cinema does, is like, it's obviously you're not in these exact situations, but
they take you back there. They make you think on things.
Well, these same issues of doubt and of loss of faith and whatever it is,
a potential global apocalypse.
Absolutely. Give me a reason not to blow my fucking brains out.
Yeah.
All of these things like are kind of ever present, concerns.
Absolutely.
That this movie, I think, really illuminates. And then, going on from there, basically, the fisherman does kill himself, and he has to go attend to the body.
He comes back and has a slightly more engaged conversation.
Oh,
with,
yeah. Oh, God. But that's
priest.
so awful. That's like the most awful.
Because in that conversation, Gunnar Bjornstrand's character pretty much admits to having his own loss of faith.
He drops the facade.
Yeah.
He's like let's be real with you. And it feels like maybe he
wants Max von Sydow to like feel less alone in his desolation, but he ends up pushing him over the edge.
He gives him the stamp of approval. Go blow your brains out, basically.
Yeah, and he does.
Yeah. It's okay. That scene, second only to the scene in the schoolhouse later, where he basically is like, "I hate your fucking guts" to the woman, right? It's so distressing because that's not what this guy needs to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like on some level he is. He may think this might actually help him.
Solidarity.
Of some kind. And I have tried this before as well. You talk to someone who's going through something and you try to appeal, like, I've been there, like life is really bad and like things are terrible and we're all hanging on by a thread, and that can be such a damaging thing for somebody to hear.
For sure.
But in this case, like, it's selfish, right? Because he may start out thinking like, this conversation might give him some perspective, but eventually,
it becomes about him.
He's just talking about himself and his own problems and his own loss of faith and his own spider god, right? That gets brought up again.
He brings up the spider god. Yeah, he's converted to spider godism.
Yeah, this is all in the Spider God extended universe. Madam Web,
yes,
of course, is there.
Across Venom, the Venom films, across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, Venom is there. Craven the Hunter is in The Silence, I think.
Morbius.
Yeah. Morbius, yeah. And, and then he leaves... Von Sydow leaves and he fucking blows his brains out by the river. And and they have to go attend to the body, and they put this tarp over him, and Bjornstrand just has to stand there like a fucking idiot, like guarding the body for there's a great article I read in Slant from Keith Ullich, who's a great film critic, film writer that I like to read it, and he's talking about it as a comedy. Right? You should actually read this. Like, now I don't think it's going to necessarily win you over to the side of this being some hilarious movie. I didn't laugh very much in this movie. But this is the kind of headline here. It's like, review of Winter Light. Bergman's film is one of cinema's great comedies, consistently producing the kind of hard, hearty laughter that nourishes the soul. Now, obviously, this is a bit of a provocation, right? But
a bit ironic.
It's still funny. So, this whole scene is essentially silent, like done in like a blizzard or snowstorm.
Yeah, and it's
by the river, the rushing
so,
river. Yeah. And after that, they go to the schoolhouse where there's this really awful conversation between him and what's the woman's name again? Is it Marta?
I want to say Marta.
Yeah, where he is just needlessly cruel to her. It is so vicious. He is just like just a total attack
I'll never love you. I loved my dead wife and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
he's like, and I hate everything about you. I hate how helpless or like how needy you are, and I hate your rashes and your periods and your, and your. And it's just so specific and so personal, and it's about her. It's not just about her personality; it's about her body. It's about everything.
And it's important to say also, I think that she's like an atheist, and she talks about being raised in kind of a godless household, but there was like a lot of love and support and joy, which just seems to be like everything that he is lacking at being a man of faith.
Yeah,
which is interesting, and I feel like maybe fuel some of his like resentment towards her as well.
Yeah, I think so, because in her letter that she reads, she is kind of doing something similar to him, where sort of dressing him down a little bit for how he's treated her.
Yeah.
But in that case, it's much more. It's like, it seems like pretty fair, considering how distant he is.
And she's still, she unfortunately she's trying to fix him.
Yeah.
She's like, I can fix him, but he is like a curmudgeonly priest. And it's like, girl. Move on. Yeah, this guy sucks.
And that comes back later. And we'll talk about that in a second, because there is a girl move on moment, which is very funny. The movie is kind of there's some funny parts. So one thing that's interesting too is like in that scene with Max von Sydow when he's telling him like the world is a vampire. He's saying like if God didn't exist, then wouldn't that be easier? Like cruelty. We would understand it. It would be understandable, because people are just like that. People are awful, and when God exists and people are cruel and kill each other and wars start and so on, then it's this unexplainable mystery. It's this why has thou forsaken Ben, And he says that like after Max von Sydow leaves, there's one moment where he's alone, and it kind of does a slow push into him, and the light changes in the church. The light changes by the window, and he does say aloud to God, why have you forsaken me? Right? Yeah, and so he's saying this whole thing like if God doesn't exist, like cruelty would be explainable, and then you remember that when you come to this scene where he's being so casually cruel to her, causing her to cry, right? But then that scene is kind of funny too, because he's leaving to go tell Max von Sydow's wife that her husband killed himself, and he's leaving, and then he comes back and says, "Hey, do you want to come?" and she's like, "Yeah, okay." so they hop in the car, and they go tell the wife. The wife is like, in this state of shock, but also like, I guess, sort of maybe not surprised, because Max von Sydow had sort of been a dead man walking for a little while, I guess, right? Again, the priest offers very perfunctory sort of, please, is there anything else I can help you? Come to the church, my child, blah, 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 this crap, and she's like, yeah, I'll come see you when we have to arrange the funeral. And they go back, and there's the scene where they're in the car, and they come to the railroad station, right? Or the rail crossing. And as the train's going by, he says something like, my parents always wanted me to be a clergyman, which feels, and I was reading a bit of this, and they mentioned this in that documentary as well, that feels the closest to when Bergman is speaking of himself, because his father was like a religious man and worked in the church and everything, and it is I think partly that duality or kind of kind of uncomfortable dichotomy for him of having a father who would preach these truths, right? But in public at church, right, and at home was very cruel to him. Would hit him and would tease him and torture him, for being a bad kid or whatever. And how could you preach this and then act this way? You know what I mean?
Sure.
And how does that make sense with God? One can picture little Bergman, young Bergman, the rapper.
Little Bergman.
Little Bergman, young Bergman.
He's just kind of young, lean.
yeah. He's just just sitting in some sort of whatever Harry Potter style alcove under a Swedish staircase, crying like, why does Papa hate me? And God remaining silent, right?
Yeah.
So that's most of the movie. Basically, after that,
well, he goes to do his like second service at an even more kind of remote church with an even like smaller, showing of people. One of which is the sexton who was there earlier. Who the sexton comes to like talk to him and his like priestly assistant after the service.
Yeah,
and they just kind of like ignore him. He's being like a dick to this guy as well, even though he's like actively helping with like running this little church and keeping up maintenance and stuff.
Yeah.
And then he comes back at the end and he's like one of the 3 people in attendance. Like
Yeah.
the 3 people in attendance are like the sexton who they were rude to.
Yeah.
Who he does have a conversation about like how
It's kind of the key part of the movie.
Yeah,
It's
so
like it's the climax of the movie.
we'll get into in a
Yeah.
second, but it's just like him, the Marta, the woman who he's been like shitting on the whole movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe a couple other people.
No, there's only one other person.
And who
She's
is
the
it?
only person who's not paid to be there.
Okay.
She's there. She's not even a believer.
Yes.
And it's the sexton and it's the organ player,
Okay.
who is played by Olaf Thunberg, who is Greta Thunberg's grandfather.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Isn't that funny?
Hilarious.
It's the only Bergman movie he's in. And he is
So
the
she's
scene.
a Nepo baby.
She's a Well, yeah, I guess you want to call it that. You
That's
know?
so fucking gross.
her grandfather, a famous actor. Yeah. He is the scene where he kind of, I don't know if it's him like negging Marta or like whatever it is, but he's talking to her and he's like, why don't you get out of here? Like, why are you obsessed with this guy? Girl, move on.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And basically saying like, you know, go be a spinster somewhere else. Like, like you know, your opportunities here are so limited. And that is the point. I was waiting for this because I had read about this in Through a Glass Darkly. That's the point where they kind of make fun of that, or you know, I don't know, maybe they're not making fun of it, but sort of call into question the validity of that God is love bit, because they actually repeat that, like God is love, like and so on, and as something that this. The Bjornstrom character used to believe in. That used to be part of his sermons, and now after his wife's died, that's not a part of it anymore. And it's hokum, you know. And he's repeating that in this kind of shitty way, I guess, to her. Anyway, and then we come to the kind of final conversation between the sexton and I'm bad with the characters' names. I should have written it down. I mean, we could just look it up, but we're not going to. And yeah, he has like a rheumatoid condition that has given him like essentially like crippling back and like ankle problems. It's actually, this condition is based off of this props master who worked on a lot of Bergman's films, who has the same issue. And it's
so
just
Bergman was kind of making fun of that prop master.
yeah.
He's kind of mocking
He's
him.
kind of mocking him. No, he worked on the film and he did help the actor kind of with that portrayal as well. And this is such a great scene where, you know, the whole movie Bjornstrand has been suffering from the silence of God and his crisis of faith. And he, as we said earlier, he does actually say earlier on in the movie, in this moment where he's alone, he says to God, presumably to the universe out loud,
Yes.
why have you forsaken me? Right. And in this conversation with the sexton before the church, before the service starts, he's saying, oh, you know, I've been reading the Gospels, and there's something that I've kind of been thinking about, that there's so much focus on Christ's physical suffering on the cross, like in the Passion. There's so much focus on that, but that would have been relatively minor, because that's like 4 hours or something. And he says, I've suffered my entire life in this very agonizing physical condition. I've suffered more than Christ. And he says, what must have been so much worse for him is the suffering of his betrayal from his followers, that nobody understood him, and that he tried to tell them, you know, what to do and how to live a good life, but he was betrayed ultimately. And then even worse than that, the final, the ultimate moment of pain for Christ must have been when he's on the cross and he says, God, my God, why have you forsaken me? And God doesn't answer.
His own father. The ultimate God's silence. And isn't that the worst pain that Christ must have felt? Yeah, and Gunnar Bjornstrand's like,
yes. he's been it's such a beautifully blocked scene too, because I don't think it really cuts between them. It focuses on the sexton character who's talking about it and moves over to Bjornstrand. And you've seen him, he's listening intently. He's not saying anything. It's like he's almost on the brink of tears, right? He's sweating too, because in this whole movie he's sick. He's got the flu. He's like, it's like First Reformed to some extent. And yeah, and he says yes, like obviously that's what I've been going through. And the sexton character, in his way, is really what the priest should be. He is the one who is, through this conversation through this discussion of, the Bible and the life of Christ, sharing the pain, shouldering the burden of existence with another person. He's the one who should be. He's the one who has the most compassionate understanding of the religion, it seems.
Yeah, the quirky best friend.
Yeah, he knows what he's talking
under
about.
Her nose.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in some sense, so the rest of the ending is they're debating like, well, we should probably just call this service off. Nobody's here. The only person who's here, who's not paid to be here, is Marta, and like whatever. But no, they hold it. And the very end of the movie, and I was very surprised by how abrupt it is. He goes out and they're holding the service for an audience of one person. He begins the service, like all is grace of God, right? All is grace, right? And it ends. And this is a movie that I think is like pretty bleak in a lot of ways, and pretty difficult. But, and I'm not necessarily saying the ending can be is a positive ending or an optimistic ending, but it's not. There's an interview with film historian Peter Cowie, who's like a big Bergman guy, right? And he does assess the ending of the film as a hopeful, optimistic one. Even if the sermon is for one person, like it's worth it. And I think obviously he's not saying that's the only power of the ending. That's obviously very simplistic, kind of optimistic or maybe too literal reading of it. But I did find it to be really spiritually satisfying. That
that's good.
He doesn't that he does go out and gives the service anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting.
If not for her, then maybe for himself. Right?
Sure. Yeah. I guess I didn't care as much about this character because, like, he's such a dick. He's such a dick throughout the movie.
Yeah.
That would have been fine if he ends the movie, like, wallowing in fucking misery. Because, like, the whole movie is kind of, like, wallowing in it.
He's a bad priest.
He's such a bad priest.
He's bad at his job.
And he's a dick. He's a very unsympathetic character who actively ruins people's lives. He's kind of like a Morgan Spurlock in that sense.
He is kind of like Morgan Spurlock.
I thought it was interesting that, like, because we kind of interpreted the ending of Through a Glass Darkly to be kind of like insincere and kind of like, Well, but it works both ways, right? No, for sure.
And so does this one.
And it was interesting that I guess like this being a response to that, Bergman maybe kind of like viewed it as like the whole God is love thing at the end of Through a Glass Darkly. Like maybe he was being a bit sincere about it when he was making it, and then kind of like was like, no, wait a minute, it's not. So this as a response to that was like kind of interesting. But I agree. I think like Through a Glass Darkly like works both ways, and then this kind of like expounds on it either way, and it still kind of works and is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I wasn't as moved or anything. I admired it. I was like, what a great like little, also kind of like a chamber piece, though, like moves to different locations a bit and stuff like that with like, but a small cast of characters, still felt very like literary in that way, in that it's kind of like this small cast kind of speaking on these like, when you zoom out, there's these like really big themes and questions and representations, and I love that stuff. And I think it's a great movie, but it didn't move me in that way. Yeah. I wonder if part of it is that the character is so fucking like lame and like such a drag of a priest. Also the more explicit like faith subject matter didn't like connect with me as much, even though I appreciate you kind of like viewing it as any kind of relationship between guidance person and then their flock, right? Whether it be like a therapist or any person in a position of authority who's kind of like giving you advice, like even a parent, really. You could definitely view it like that. Yeah, just didn't hit home the way it did for you, I guess. But also, you're way more of a religious guy.
Well, it's funny, like I know we talked on the show before when we did those Jesus movies, we talked about our experience with religion. Christometer. We rated things on the Christometer. I think this is like a beautiful movie for religious people to watch.
And I can only imagine how hard it would have hit in the 60s, like when it came out, where people were a bit more, people were sheep. and people were like inundated in the church and way more lost in the sauce.
Well, he was also saying in that Ingmar Bergman makes a pizza movie. What was it called again?
Ingmar Bergman makes a pizza.
Ingmar Bergman bakes a cake for Ben. Happy birthday. That's what he said. Happy birthday to you, to you, Hakatua. Happy birthday, Hakatua.
Spit on that thing. Oh God, that was not it.
Oh yeah.
In that thing.
History will not look kindly on our show.
No.
we're going to hell. We're going to Swedish hell.
History's not going to look on our show at all.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's actually comforting.
Yeah.
That's actually more comforting. Yeah. What were we saying? Oh yeah. No wait. What were we saying?
Moment in the documentary
right.
where he talks about dogma.
No, wait. What were we saying? Where he talks about what?
The reception of the movie.
Contemporaneously. Yeah. So there were some harsh reviews.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. But no, there was one thing he was saying when they were asking him to anticipate the reception in the early to mid '60s in Sweden, as I'm sure was the case in other countries. He was saying, amongst intellectual circles, the critic class, whatever, any mention of God was very unfashionable, right? Because this was the beginning of our atheism, the roots, the seeds. And there were some reviews that would say, "Oh well, why does he always make religious movies?" Right? And I think he was bothered by that a little bit. I don't know, and I'm sensing that maybe the religious themes are maybe what held you back a bit from enjoying it. Like aside from him being just like a piece of shit, maybe the overt religiosity of it is like maybe what's preventing you from enjoying it as much as something like Winter Light, which has religious themes, but
Through Glass Darkly.
Through Glass Darkly. But and I'm not necessarily saying it's better. I mean, I think these two are really good movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely prefer Through Glass Darkly. But it's weird because, like, as you were saying, like, maybe the overt religiosity of it is what's, like, not as appealing to me now. But it's, like, I can acknowledge that's what made it probably, like, so important and cool to have been made, like, in the time and place that it was made, Like, if we were alive in 60s Sweden, if we were, like, Alof and Bean, and we were like, we'd be like, this is the greatest movie of all time. Like, this is so important and cool that he made this. And now it's like more removed. Now that I've been so our atheism pilled, I can appreciate it like very deeply.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay. Well, no. So that reminds me of something I was going to say, because I know we did talk about our religion, right? And our sort of experience with religion a little bit on some of those shows. And I hope I was able to communicate a little bit, at least, like, I am not really a believer. I don't go to church. I don't subscribe to any specific religion. I'm not a religious person. I don't think about God very much, etc. But, and I don't even necessarily wouldn't say I'm a spiritual person, which I think a lot of people would say when they're maybe too afraid to admit that they are religious or believe in God. They'll say, "Oh, I'm a spiritual person. I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual." So,
Coward.
Well, but this is what I'm saying is like, I think as I've grown up and matured, I think we a lot of people tend to go through that Reddit atheism phase a little bit. The as you mentioned at the beginning, Christopher Hitchens or Richard Dawkins or people like that, where
Bill Maher.
My dad and I did go see Religulous in movie theaters.
That's awesome.
Yeah, can you imagine a Bill Maher movie in movie theaters? Club Random in movie theaters. The Club Random movie.
I'd go.
I would go. I would go. Of course we would go. It would be a Kevin Smith style event where he has to pay. You have to pay $100 to go, and he comes out at the end and goes, "Hey guys,
buy my weed.
Who wants to smoke some weed?" Yeah. No, but this movie for me, and maybe so much of what I liked about it, is that I feel like it's an important part of this sort of journey to not saying I'm going to grow up and become closer to God or closer to religion.
Yeah.
But after you go through this period of atheism, that I think is in large part a reaction to
what you grew up with,
what you grew up with, etc. And like I said in those episodes, we were never like a really religious church going family, but we did sometimes, and that was an element of it. And I think my parents have had similar journeys. My dad especially, come to understand perhaps maybe he is an atheist as well. And in my day to day, as I say, I feel like an atheist. But there's something about religion and about, I guess, just by virtue of it being the religion I'm the most familiar with and the one that I grew up with, Christianity, that I find kind of fascinating and that I'm interested in exploring a little bit more. And what interests me maybe the most is, as someone who I guess, you could describe as an atheist, right? What interests me the most is the people who have the power to believe in something, the people who are capable of faith, and the people who are capable of believing in God. And not just capable, but comfortable. Do you know what I mean? With themselves.
Yeah.
And taking that leap. And this is a long sort of process, because with that our atheism stuff, you become really militant about it. Like a lot of political beliefs that you grow up into or get radicalized by, especially in your early 20s, you become really militantly atheist. Like how I could never really be close with somebody who believed in God. I could never date someone who believed in God, right? Or whatever it is. And you look down on people who do, right? And you think, well, that's an intellectual inferiority if you believe in God, right? And it's these sorts of things that, and I think also just as you become more of a worldly person, that you sort of understand, well, that's extremely flawed, because there are all sorts of people who believe in God who are smart, intelligent, beautiful people, of course, right? And then you pull back from that kind of our atheism, Reddit atheism thing, and then it can start to feel cringe, this like, in the same way that the right wing people like love to own the libs, it's like owning the religious people with facts and logic, and Christopher Hitchens and Dawkins and so on, this whole thing, right? And so perhaps to tie it back to Winter Light, like perhaps my enjoyment of movies like this, or specifically the religious Bergman movies, Virgin Spring, which I had just seen recently, and to some extent also Through a Glass Darkly, these ideas, these films that explore this conflict of faith and this and the silence of God, which I find to be troubling in my daily life to some extent. Not the silence of a literal God that I believe in, but
just like an existential
seemingly the silence of some higher good, some higher power, that some organizational structure to the universe that benefits good and levels out, and decimates evil, which is clearly not the universe that we live in.
Yeah, we just got shat out and are kind of left to fend for ourselves.
Well, this past year has been a living, waking nightmare. Obviously with genocide in Gaza, but also this horrible feeling that all across the world, we are so much closer to a complete totalitarian fascist takeover that it's something that always has to be fought against, railed against, because at any moment it just feels like it's so close to happening. I start to feel like the Max von Sydow character, where it's not just like nuclear annihilation, which was, obviously maybe a more potent or mysterious kind of unknowable, or maybe not unknowable, but maybe more present, recent anxiety of the 60s. Now is just like, Oppenheimer style, a just ever present fact of life that we are so at any moment so close to being destroyed.
What time is the doomsday clock at?
Well, it's actually very close to
midnight.
Yeah, but the doomsday clock is a scam. It's it's a scam by Big Clock,
Rolex.
I mean literally, not just Big Clock like a large consortium of clocks, but literally the people who make big clocks.
Big Ben.
Yeah, because the clock towers are pretty out these days, and actually the doomsday clock, which is one of the biggest clocks in the world, is one of their biggest sponsors. So
is this your just kind of way of telling me that you've set yourself up on like Christian Mingle or J date, and you're like opening the.
Jeez,
You're opening the doors.
Anything. I'll do anything. I'll do anything right now. No, I'm just saying, like, a movie. This is what's so great about Bergman's movies is that, they are specific to a time and a place, to 60 Sweden. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. But the concerns are so universal that in 2024 in Canada, me, like it lives a very comfortable existence. Certainly
big shot at the hotel.
Yeah, big shot at the hotel.
Shot at the film festival.
But yeah, big movie star, obviously. No, but genuinely, a privileged person, who can live in this expensive city, even if not, maybe not in the best way, but can, right? Maybe not the greatest. Maybe not the great. I'm not saying
it's a life.
I'm not saying I'm in the high rise or anything, but I'm surviving and obviously definitely a privileged person. But these specific anxieties, I can watch this movie a couple nights ago, and these specific anxieties that are presented in this film seem so super relevant to my life. That yes. I can watch this and say, my God, like, why hast thou forsaken me? You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
I don't know. It's just like an incredible work of art.
No,
I know. I'm really rambling. I think I found I think I found Through a Glass Darkly to be more disturbing, because as we talked about in that the mental health aspect of it, when I'm relating to that aspect of the movie. Like I said in that episode, I've never, had a psychic breakdown kind of like that, but enough experience with very bad mental health that relating to that can be very disturbing to me personally, right? And I know you felt somewhat similar, right? Like that.
Yeah.
But with Winter Light, I don't think I find this movie disturbing, and I don't think I necessarily find it bleak, but it really captivates me, and I feel like. Even though I'm not a priest, even though I'm not a believer, that I can feel how the Gunnar Bjornstrand character feels. You can feel that silence of God in your everyday life, and you can feel how it manifests itself in cruelty.
But don't be like Gunnar Bjornstrand. Be like the sexton.
Yes, for sure.
Acknowledge the silence of God and the cosmic irony of it all.
100%.
But just kind of be helpful. Lend a kind ear.
Yeah, be a good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm happy for you. I'm happy you pulled so much away from it, and I hope you find a nice Christian lady to bring home to mom.
Great. Great. Yeah, I want to rate it.
Yeah. How many blown out Max von Sydow brains out of 5 do you give the movie?
Oh, Alex, why do you have to be so crass?
Ask Bergman.
Oh, well, I mean, this is a 5 brainer for me. Yeah, this is 5 brains. Definitely. Yeah, of course.
I'm gonna give it 4. It's a 4 brainer for me. Yeah, I admire it greatly as a work of art. I don't feel the urge to watch it again anytime soon. And cancel Father Tomas.
Yeah, he's canceled.
He's a bad
yeah,
man.
if there's one thing you got to take away from it, he's canceled. He's canceled. Yeah. There's an alternate take of the movie, and it ends like this, where they've been talking about the silence of God the entire time, and then at the very end, at the service, Gunnar Bjornstrand looks up to heaven, and then there's a big booming God voice, and he comes, and a big finger that comes down like Monty Python style, a big finger that points at him and says, "You're canceled."